Welcome. I'm David Winstead, and welcome to this show. And I very much appreciate your interest in Channel 16, Montgomery Municipal Cable. And we have a wonderful guest here today, Ricky Smith, who's Executive Director of the Maryland Aviation Commission. Ricky, thank you for welcoming us here to BWI.
Thank you, David. It's great to be here.
Yeah,
Looking forward to joining the Channel 16 audience.
Oh, great. Well, I fortunately have had the experience over the years of working with you, going back to the late 90s and being a member of the Aviation Commission.
Yes,
I'm fairly knowledgeable about all the wonderful things you do here at BWI. But just as a starter, could you tell us a little bit about your background? I know you've been with Maryland DOT for a long time and
Yes.
Maryland MAA, but it'd be of interest.
Well, just for starters, I mean, one, I enjoyed your tenure as Secretary of MDOT, and so thank you for that. And
thank you.
And you're one of the valued members of the Maryland Aviation Commission, so continue to thank you for that service. I think we have a great working relationship. So I've been in transportation for about 30 years. I say transportation because I spent, about 3 years at State Highway as the Deputy Administrator, but most of my time in transportation has been in aviation. Spent time here, obviously, but also spent 10 years in Cleveland as the CEO there. I returned here in 2015 when Governor Hogan asked if I would come back and head up the Maryland Aviation Administration. It's been a labor of love ever since.
Well, it's it's a wonderful department, and it's one of 5 agencies under Maryland DOT.
That's correct, and then we have the Transportation Authority,
right?
And we happen to be responsible for not just BWI Marshall, but we also have Martin State Airport, which is a general aviation airport in Middle River, East Baltimore County, and then we also regulate aviation throughout the state. So there are about 135 airports throughout the state. 34 of those airports are public use airports, and so we regulate them to make sure they meet certain safety standards, and we also provide funding. We have about a $3 million a year budget that we provide funding to those airports to make sure that they have what they need to make safety improvements to their facilities.
Right, and I think, whether you're Montgomery County a resident or statewide resident, BWI is just such an attractive way to travel, which sort of brings us to the timing of this interview. We've gone through, obviously, and I know all your efforts in that regard, but gone through a very challenging time in the aviation industry the last year and a half, with COVID and with obviously the decrease in travel. But I know yesterday it was reported that there are 2 million people traveling per day now, so it certainly has bounced back. But could you share with us a little bit about, now that we're sort of coming out of post-COVID, the kinds of actions that BWI did to kind of maintain health safety here, but also welcome travelers, those that came through, and kind of what experiences you had during that period?
Well, I mean, obviously when we were going through the pandemic itself, looking back into last year, the traffic levels had been decimated, and so there was still a responsibility for us to maintain a safe facility for those airport users. The airport never closed, right? We still had a significant population of employees here at the airport who I think were some of the most courageous people in the country. And then there were still passengers that were flying. They had essential reasons for flying, and so we had to maintain a safe facility. And so we engaged in a host of aggressive cleaning, expansive sanitation, and then disinfecting activities just to make sure that the airport was safe. And we can talk more about the signage and the messaging that we did just to inform the passenger on how to engage in safe behavior. But we also continue to work with our airline partners to make sure that they understood that we were ready to accommodate their service when they were in a position to return. And more importantly, we had a very aggressive messaging campaigns to the general public to help them understand that although at one period of time we discouraged flying, we understood that there were some passengers that just needed to fly, and that the airport was a safe place for them to use. Now, of course, we're encouraging flight, but we're also encouraging that you manage your expectations and that you understand that when you come into the facility, it's not going to look like a year ago. It's going to look closer to pre-pandemic. There will be lines and And so you should build time into your travel schedule when you come, because we're getting closer to normal than we've been in a very long time.
Well, that's great. And, you know, I know that the FAA yesterday announced another $8 billion targeted from to the airports.
Yes.
And I know there was some funding that the airport received just because of the huge drop in revenues.
Yes.
You might, the airport, the passenger facility charges that all travelers pay on their ticket is a huge part of revenues to the airport. But that aid that came during that period was helpful, correct? I mean,
so,
really...
so we received significant aid through the CARES Act. We received funding through the CARISA Act, and so it's good to see that the federal government is now beginning to release funds through the American Rescue Plan. And all of those funds are critical to replacing lost revenue to the airport, because again, the airport system continued to operate and those revenues were critical to paying for critical services. But probably more important than that, you know, we are an ecosystem, and you know, people come to the airport not to meet with me or my team. They come to the airport to fly,
right,
and to use the amenities that are here. And so it was important to us to make sure that those partners were in the best position to continue providing services. And so those funds from the federal government also allowed us to provide rent relief to those partners. And we did that in a substantial way. As a matter of fact, we led the industry in providing those kinds of relief packages and serve as a model for the rest of the industry in terms of how that should happen. And so we thought it was important. We applaud the federal government for stepping in on the airport side. We think it was also important that they step in on the airline side, which they did in a major way as well.
Right.
And so we're busily allocating those funds to make sure that we put them to best use.
Right. Ricky, BWI is the busiest airport in the Baltimore, Washington market. I know we've got Reagan and we've got Dulles, right? But you all, which a lot of people don't know, I mean, are the busiest airports in terms of flights, correct?
Yes. You know, I actually enjoy hearing you say that, given that you are in Montgomery County. That is absolutely true. That, as a matter of fact, 1 month, it wasn't very long ago, where we handled half of the market, over half of the market. So that's just how much of the market share we control. But for years, we've been the busiest airport in the Baltimore, Washington region. And we see that, that market share growing at a progressive rate. And we think it has everything to do with, in this environment, people feel very comfortable that we've taken the steps to maintain a safe facility. But in addition to that, we think we just offer a more attractive option of flights. We are a low-cost airport, which allows our airline portfolio to be more of a low-fare portfolio of airlines, and so we enjoy a lot of leisure travelers and small business travelers that are looking for economical flights. And so we think we have a competitive advantage that we will enjoy for a long time. And we're glad to see residents of Montgomery County see us that way as well.
Well, we have the inter-county connector for the people in the Upper County. Ricky, let me ask, you know, looking at the change of sort of post-pandemic work habits, you know, we were talking a little bit about the airport and critical operations during COVID, but now people are starting to come back. There's been, you know, there's quite a lot of studies that suggest the firm I'm with is actually cutting back space by 30% over the coming 3 years. And so I'd be interested in hearing, as workers that didn't previously do as much telecommuting or as comfortable on, you know, virtual meetings as they are now, given the unfortunate events of the last year and a half. What impact do you think that might have, sort of this virtual work, the growth in virtual work, in terms of business travelers coming to use air options here at BWI? Do you think it'll have an impact?
So the recovery that we've experienced so far has been largely leisure traveler. The economy itself is still working its way back. So we haven't had the level of experience with business travelers yet to kind of make that evaluation. But however, as you referenced studies, you know, the industry is bracing for a reduction in business travel because that segment of our society is experiencing and growing used to this virtual environment. And we don't think that that will be substantial, but we do think that there will be a larger segment of the population deciding to do virtual meetings instead of a day trip, for example,
right.
Which will have some impact. But we think at the end of the day, when the economy recovers, the industry will be stronger than it's ever been.
Well, that's good to hear. And I think you're right. I think as people, get back into the office and they realize the benefits of being with their teams or going to see their clients, flying to go to see their clients, I think you're right.
And I talk to people often, as I'm sure you do, and it's not unusual to hear someone talk about the thirst to interact with people face to face.
Yeah,
I mean, I think the virtual meeting had its place, but I think it's wearing thin.
Right. I'm very much of a committed traveler to BWI and also to Southwest Airlines. And, over the decades, Southwest, when they, 20 years ago or more, really started concentrating operations here, their growth has been spectacular. And I know from your job and responsibilities, you've got to anticipate that, understand what their terminal capacity is, what their baggage handling needs are. So what have been some of the real, obviously, successes of Southwest growth here, but also some of the challenges over these years?
Well, Southwest will tell you. Gary Kelly, the CEO, has told us that BWI is one of the most critical stations in their system. I think some 66% of all of their activities every day comes through BWI Marshall. The only thing, so we're their second largest facility, and the only thing stunting their growth is capacity, baggage handling capacity. And so we have a number of projects that we can talk about that are designed to add the capacity that they need. We think once we get to the other side of those projects, which is just a few years away, we'll see BWI begin to emerge as probably their top destination in the country. Yes.
That's great. And during my tenure here at MDOT, we actually, I think, opened the international terminal.
That's right.
It's the late 90s,
yes,
I believe.
Yes.
And I know that international travel is still a huge commitment here. And I heard yesterday that Iceland Air is coming back to BWI. So that also includes growth in the international sector.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, so this is Iceland's third attempt here.
Right.
We think they'll do better this time because they won't have the competition that they had to deal with in the past. But it's an amazing flight. People who take the flight love Reykjavik, right? So you get to spend perhaps an overnight or a day in Reykjavik, and then you can get to any place in Europe. And it's an affordable flight, and so we're excited to have Iceland Air back. But Southwest itself, we were talking about, they offer a number of destinations to leisure international markets as well, and we're looking forward to that growth coming back. We're looking forward to international traffic coming back in general. British Airways is an important part of our international program. We call them our flagship operator, and they're just waiting for Europe to open up, and we'll see them come back as well.
Well, that's great, and we still have countries in Europe trying to figure out how whether you get on the plane and get tested.
Yes.
Well, Ricky, I appreciate it. We're going to take just a quick break here, and we'll be back with Ricky Smith, Executive Director of the Maryland Aviation Administration. Thank you.
Our fight against coronavirus isn't over. We still have to slow the spread and do our part. Let's wear face masks in public. Stay 6 feet or more from others. Follow state and local guidelines. Wash our hands frequently and stay home when we feel safe. For ourselves, for our loved ones, for our future. Let's move forward together. Learn more at coronavirus.gov.
Well, welcome back. This is David Winstead, and we're up here at BWI Airport, and we have the pleasure of having the Executive Director of the Maryland Aviation Administration, Ricky Smith, with us. And Ricky, thanks again for taking the time today.
Absolutely.
Access to the airport, I know that through your career here at MAA, and access to the airport is key.
Yes.
And as the growth in Maryland, as the growth in the National Capital Region has continued, congestion has continued.
Yes.
We can certainly anticipate, I think, that maybe COVID will mitigate that a little bit as people do decide to work 2 days at home and 3 days in the office or whatever. It could end up, mitigating congestion a bit. But access to the airport, convenience of parking is key. And what have you, over the years, what actions have you taken to sort of make sure that access is flowing, that if the State Highway Administration, with all their plans, for example, of widening the Beltway and I-270, the inter-county connector, how has all that played into the success here at BWI?
So we enjoy, as we alluded to earlier, we enjoy a relationship with the Maryland Department of Transportation and our sister agency, the Maryland State Highway Administration, that works very hard to not just improve traffic access in the state, but they recognize BWI as an important destination. And so over the years, they've worked very hard to improve access to BWI. The inter-county connector is one more recent example of that, but you've heard talks about the Transportation Relief Plan in the National Capital Region, and it's those kinds of efforts that will improve access, not just in that region, but will improve access to BWI Marshall. We enjoy transit access like most other airports do not. We have the light rail that brings access from the Baltimore area. MARC service allows traffic from the DC area to the airport, and we get that transit option gets a lot of utilization. And so we think access is important. Once you get to the airport, we think we're one of the easiest airports to use. That's why we consider ourselves the easy come, easy go airport. And if you look at some of the features we have in our parking facilities, for example, to make it easier for you to get in and out of our parking facilities, you'll see what we mean when we say we're easy come, easy go. And then once you get in the terminal, there's not an airport in the country that's easier to get from ticket counter to hold room than BWI Marshall. So we think that the effort to traverse from your home to the gate is easier here at BWI Marshall than most other airports in the country, and we think that's part of the reason why we're the preferred airport in the region.
Right. Also, I assume from just the parking fee basis that you're more competitive than trying to park at National or Dulles.
So that's not something that I'm going to brag about, but yes, we are. We are very affordable.
Right.
We have not, except for reducing our rates during COVID period, we have not increased our parking rates in probably 15 or so years, when other airports have, and so that has allowed us to be more affordable.
Right.
But there's a downside to that. That's revenue that we're not bringing in that will allow us to build and improve other amenities to the public. But we're happy that our public gets to enjoy the competitive rates that we offer.
Right. And the whole funding basis of the agency, of the administration, in terms of a capital program, it's hundreds of millions of dollars a year in terms of annual capital program. I had heard that, just in the case of the baggage handling facility that, I still think is in process of being upgraded, it was like $500 million, right? So how do you address that kind of capital need over a number of years? So
all of our major capital programs, projects are funded through bond issuances, which are handled through the Maryland Department of Transportation, through MDOT. In our case, however, our bonds are supported by the revenues of the airport, be it revenues from the passenger facility charges that we collect from every ticket that a passenger buys, or our general operating revenues, parking revenues, revenues from food and retail, taxi, rental cars. All of those revenues are used to support the bonds that we issue to support our capital projects. And so the AB Connector baggage handling system improvement project that is underway, that's a $400+ million project that's all designed to improve Southwest's ability to provide more flights, handle more customers in a more convenient manner.
Interesting. So I know that addressing the needs as the airport grows and the runways and baggage handling, all that's important. But you also, which I don't think the average traveler understands, you have to be engaged with the community around you. That having long-term plans, looking at where new air cargo facilities can be located, does impact the community, which I know just by experience, having spent some time here years ago, is not an inactive group. They're a very engaged group of interest. So how do you plan, for example, I know that that not too long ago the FAA advanced a new aviation system, and it required you to really engage. Can you explain a little bit about the role you play with the neighbors?
So, so in that role, we were on our heels in the case of NextGen, because the FAA took some actions that that quite frankly did not adequately engage the airport or our community. Okay. And so, so in reaction to that, the state took a number of actions, including filing a petition, lawsuits against the FAA in the community's defense. But we took a proactive measure in conjunction with the FAA, and we formed a community roundtable that would give the affected community, members in Anne Arundel and Howard counties, the ability to provide feedback on the impact of aircraft noise, and to also come together with a number of recommended solutions to mitigate the impact of noise, because the FAA wanted one set of solutions, not a bunch of solutions from hundreds of residents. And so that community group, the roundtable, worked very well in partnership with us and Southwest, as well as the FAA, and we were able to provide them a recommendation last year, and so the FAA is now going through the process of considering those recommended changes to the flight paths. And so hopefully that works out. That will make some improvements to the impact. But that's a regulated process. Beyond that, we also recognize ourselves as an important community partner. And so we have a number of voluntary efforts that we take. For example, when you get a chance to walk through the terminal, you'll see our Community Partners Program, where we invite not-for-profit organizations throughout the Baltimore, Washington region to showcase their services to airport users. Again, just trying to provide them exposure. And we do a host of things with Baltimore City, Anne Arundel County, to bring youth and others into the airport so that they can experience life in the airport. And so they begin to see the airport as a neighbor, as a partner, as opposed to this, this source of noise pollution.
Right. Well, the other partners that are key here at BWI and every airport are also the airlines themselves, which I don't think people, I know that when you arrive late at night sometimes you have to, at some airports, not BWI, you have to wait for bags. But key partners are the airlines and TSA, one that's responsible for security and screening, the other that's responsible for the flight, flight operations and baggage. How have you managed those partnerships over the years? I mean, I know you've done it very successfully because the busiest airport in the region, but looking at TSA and the airlines, what kind of leadership do you have to engage in terms of dealing with those two partners?
So we do not have absolute control over any of those. I try to simplify one's understanding of the airport by helping them understand that we are a landlord. We own the airport, but we lease the space, right? As I alluded to earlier, no one comes to the airport to meet with Ricky Smith or my team. They come to the airport because they want to fly. And there are a number of amenities that they enjoy to get to their flight. And so we recognize that that what's more important than us are our partners. And so we got to have a good relationship with them. And so we don't make critical decisions without them influencing those decisions, trying to develop a consensus with them. We advocate on their behalf when it's necessary. They support us when we're trying to get support for important amenities. And so we truly see this airport as an ecosystem. We're all interdependent, and we work very closely together during hard times and during times that are not so hard. Southwest Airlines is our hub carrier, if you will.
Right, right.
And so without their presence, you know, this community would not enjoy the broad airline service that it has. And TSA is a government installation at the airport. They play an important role. I don't think they get the credit sometimes that they deserve, but we recognize they too have their challenges with resources, and so we have to work with them to allow them to do the best that they can, because the passenger, when they have a bad experience, they don't say TSA is screwing up. They don't say the airline is screwing up. They say the airport is screwing up, and we are the airport. Right. And so, so we work very closely with them to make sure that we're doing the best we can to offer the best to all of our passengers.
You know, Ricky, the other side of it is passengers coming here. You know, it's a beautiful airport, and
thank you.
You know, the sunlight you capture in so many of the terminal, the main terminal, and also the concourses, it really makes it a great experience. But also the concessions, and I have noticed over my years, when I had an office here 20 years ago, there's been a lot of thought put into the concessionaires and the kind of food and quality of food. Obviously, health food is becoming you know, more and more in demand, and I've watched the airport kind of shift. You know, in its food service. And what are some of the new ideas that might be?
So and you know this because you were around when we made these kind of changes. You know, for years, for 30 years or so, our airport program, our food and retail program was managed. It was a management model, which meant one company kind of owned and operated all of the stores. And so we made a policy decision to shift from that model to a developer model where the food and retail landlord does not own or operate any of the stores. And so all of those food and retail shops are independently owned, which means they compete with each other. So they have to provide a high quality of service if they're going to win business from those customers. And so that competition drives sales, it drives quality, and that's why you see an improvement in the program. And so we've instructed them that we do want local concepts in the airport because we want people coming to Maryland to enjoy what Maryland has to offer. But we also want a balance of national brands because we also want people coming into Maryland to see what's familiar to them. And so that's led to an award-winning program. Local and minority participation surpasses 60%, almost 70% of the program. Wow. And so we're excited about what we've been able to do. Local concepts like Miss Shirley's or Bricky's, for example, stand out as examples of what you can do whenever you put a lot of thought into having a program that drives and supports the local economy. Right.
To that point, we got one last question on our timing. So in terms of just a quick comment, in terms of the employment, both generated by the airport, MAA, and airline personnel, and then also looking at the kickoff of economic impact, just a couple quick comments about the kind of economic engine BWI is.
So during normal times, BWI accounts for over 106,000 jobs. In the region. There are about 12 to 14,000 employees that work here at the airport during normal times. This is pre-pandemic. And so by any measure, BWI Marshall is, if not the leading, is one of the leading economic drivers in the region. And that goes beyond just transporting people. These are jobs for people in this community. And a lot of the workers here enjoy jobs that otherwise they wouldn't have access to. And so we also think that that's important.
Well, that's great. Well, Ricky, thank you. We've had Ricky Smith, the Executive Director of the Maryland Aviation Administration. It's great to be here at BWI, Ricky, and thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
And thank the viewers for watching this program with Ricky Smith, the Executive Director of the Maryland Aviation Administration here at BWI Airport. And we look forward to being back with you again next month for a very interesting topic, and thanks again.